You're listening to episode 8 of the Journey to Launch podcast, 8 steps to paying off and staying out of debt.
T-minus 10 seconds.
Welcome to the Journey to Launch podcast with your host, Jamila Souffrant. As a money expert who walks her talk, she helps brave journeyers like you get out of debt, save, invest, and build real wealth. Join her on the journey to launch to financial freedom in
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Journey to Launch podcast. I am your host, Jamila. This is episode 8, and I'm so excited that you could join me today. Today, I'm just doing a solo episode, and I'll be talking about debt. Isn't that everyone's favorite subject? I know it's something that a lot of you guys still struggle with. So whether that is just debt that you've accumulated in the past, or it's debt that you are continuing to pile on to your existing debt and just trying to figure out how to get out of that debt. I mean, debt is something that is very important to not only discuss, but to figure out how to get rid of it. And so before we jump into the episode, I want to say thank you for joining me. All of the show notes, so anything that I talk about here, I will also link back in the show notes to journeytolaunch.com/episode 8. So you can find all that information there. I'm actually back home from Podcast Movement. So if you heard episode 7, you heard that I talked a little bit about it. And if you follow me on social media, and if you're listening to this in real time, you'll know that I was at Podcast Movement, which is the leading podcast event for podcasters. And I learned so much, and I'll definitely have some things that I took away that I can use to improve this podcast and how I relate to you guys, my listeners. And just a couple things that I'm looking forward to sharing with you guys once it comes out is I did my first live podcast interview. So you'll get to hear that in a couple weeks. So if not the next episode, you'll hear it the episode after. I did that with Patrice Washington, who is just a superstar. So she's America's money maven. She's been on the Steve Harvey show. She has her own radio platform through the Steve Harvey show's network. And she just in general, she just knows her stuff. And we just had an awesome conversation. So I can't wait for you to hear that. And if you're a Stacking Benjamins podcast listener, I got to go back on Stacking Benjamins as a panel guest, which was amazing because I got to do it with PT Money, who is the founder of FinCon, and then Hillary Hendershot, who is the Profit Boss radio woman. So she does that podcast. So you'll be able to hear me on that episode of Stacking Benjamins pretty soon, I believe. And then you'll hear my interview with Patrice really soon too. So I can't wait for you guys to hear that. So let's jump right into today's topic. Oh, and before I forget, if you are listening to this, if you like this, please subscribe. You know, I usually say if you are listening on iTunes, subscribe, but I want to make sure that I don't care where you're listening, subscribe, review, rate. Most importantly, it's best to tell someone about this. So if you are getting good value, if you are enjoying this, tell a friend, tell someone to check out the Journey to Launch podcast and put them on so that you guys can be on this journey to financial freedom together. And I just got to say this, if you are listening to in iTunes, just leave that review because it really, really helps me out. All right, so let's jump into the topic of debt. For me, you know, it's one of the things where when I first started this journey and when I started to share it on the Journey to Launch platform, I did not have consumer debt. I only had my mortgage debt, which we still have, and then the mortgage on our investment property. But I had debt at one point, and I realized that I don't talk about it much because it's funny because I guess I started my journey at the point where I didn't have it. Like I wasn't focused on that. So I don't personally talk about my own debt, but I have been in debt and, you know, my husband has been in debt. Now, granted, it wasn't really ever credit cards because we usually would pay our credit cards in full every month, but it was a typical debt such as some car loans, and we had a home equity line. So I had a home equity line on my Dumbo property, which I talked about a bit, that I bought at 22. So I had a home equity line on that as debt. We both had some car loans here and there for debt, and then student loans. So I don't know anyone who really can escape the wrath and just the plague of student loans, but we had student loans too. The numbers, I'd say I can't specifically remember, but I know when I graduated, my student loan debt was in the about 20 something $1,000. So that coupled with the home equity line and then the on and off probably car loans that we had, I would say my husband and I, over the course of 12 years, so since we graduated from college, probably paid off $80,000 to $100,000 in debt in order for us to be debt free. So yeah, I mean, I get it. And for us, it was, as you can see, it took us a while to come to the point where we no longer have debt. And so it's not something to say as when we start talking about, oh, we saved and invested $85,000. I mean, that's because we don't have any debt. If we did have debt that we had to focus on, we wouldn't be able to do that. So I wanted to just make that clear that we did have debt at one point and we worked our butts off in order to pay it off. This episode was to talk about how one can get out of debt. So, and not only get out of debt, but stay out of debt. And I came up with 8 steps for you to do in order for you to get going on this debt payoff journey. Because the quicker you can get out of debt, the quicker you can start building wealth. You can start seeing that negative net worth go from negative to 0 to positive. And then you can start making all your dreams come true. And that's not to say that if you are in current debt, you cannot dream, you cannot be investing in somehow, because we'll talk about that a bit. But I am a person that I just don't like debt unless I can use it for good. And I know some people do not agree with that. But for me, I use credit cards to travel for free. We just took out a home equity line on our current property and we don't intend to use it, but I just like having it there as a backup, as an emergency backup in case anything happens. And I'll link to, I had actually a blog post about why we took out a home equity line. So I can link to that in the show notes too. So let's get to it. 8 steps to paying off and staying out of debt. So before you can create wealth and reach financial freedom, you got to get out of debt. Your debt is weighing you down and literally holding you back from reaching your goals. What is the proper way to do it? Now, I know that it's not going to be a one size fits all. You can take these steps, you can reorganize, you can rearrange, but I do think if you follow them, you'll be able to make some headway with your debt payoff. So step 1, list your debts. I know this seems very simple, but I can't tell you how many people don't understand or know how much debt they're in. They have an idea, but they really don't know. So list your debts. So complete a list of all your debts, excluding your mortgage. I like to say if you do have a mortgage, that doesn't need to be your focus. If you have consumer debt in terms of paying it off, that is something you can focus on after you pay off your consumer debt. So write out the following for each consumer debt you have: the name of the creditor, the minimum monthly payment, the outstanding debt, and the interest rate. Write those all out. And if you are listening to this, don't worry, I will have this in the show notes that you can just check that out. And I have a debt payoff blueprint that will go through each of these steps, or the main ones you can use as a downloadable as a bonus to this podcast episode. Again, you'll find that in the show notes, journeytolaunch.com/episode 8. All right, so you have listed your debts. That is step 1. You're good. Step 2, complete a debt behavior assessment. So for each debt that you listed, jot down what made you accumulate the debt in the first place. So the reasons for some debts are going to be more obvious than others. So student loan debt, that's obviously because you went to school. So maybe some other debts could be your credit card debt or your car loan. How did you accumulate these? So if you have separate credit cards and one credit card you used because it was for a vacation 2 years ago that you still have not paid off, put that it was for a vacation. And then, maybe it was another credit card you use for Christmas gifts and ongoing just emergencies that you can't necessarily pay in cash, so you use your credit card. I want you to actually list how and why you accumulated those debts. Go back and identify the reason. And I say this because it is key to come to terms with why and how the debt was accumulated in the first place. It's a good accountability exercise because you can look back and say to yourself, was that worth it? So was the vacation that I took a year ago that I still have not paid off worth it? And your answer might be yes, but worth it in the sense that now you are still struggling to pay it off. And every month, if you're not paying it off in full, it's just accumulating more interest. So initially that $1,500, $2,000 vacation really in the end is going to end up costing you $3,000, let's say, or $4,000, depending on your interest rate when they put all that interest back on to your payments. So if you can go back, would you still make that purchase? Like, be real with yourself. The answers to these questions will hopefully stop you from making unnecessary purchases going forward, and hopefully will force you to be more thoughtful with your spending decisions. Because what happens often is, especially if you have consumer credit card debt, you will spend and not realize like it's just blind spending. But if you can go back and identify why and the emotional reasons maybe behind why you spent, then hopefully the next time you do pull out that credit card, at least you'll double think. Maybe it won't stop you, but at least you'll double think about why you're doing it. And that's just the first step. Step 3, this is going to sound really corny, but debt pledge. Make a debt pledge to yourself that you will not use credit cards or take out any more debt going forward. If you cannot pay for it in full at the time of the purchase, you can't afford it and you don't need to buy it. So pledge to yourself. If you are right now in debt, you cannot pay off all your debt every month. So you have credit card debt, you're still accumulating every month. Stop. Do not go further into debt. And it seems so simple. I know some of this stuff is just like, okay, Jamila, like if it was that simple, I would do it. But my point is, these steps need to happen, these little baby ones, because people skip over it all the time and don't recognize the importance of them. So step 3, debt pledge. Step 4, organize your debts. And I like to put it in 3 lists. So you're going to have all your debts listed from step 1, and then you're going to organize them in 3 separate lists. So you're going to do one list of lowest to highest outstanding debt balance. The second list will be highest to lowest interest rate. And the third will be highest to lowest emotional discomfort or annoyance. So I'm going to go back and explain each one. So the highest outstanding debt balance list, that is just basically if you have a credit card for $20,000 and you have another credit card for $5,000, the $5,000 debt will go after the $20,000 debt. You are doing it in descending order. Highest to lowest interest rate debt. So that is if you have a credit card or a car loan of 16% versus your other loans are 12% or 5%, regardless of the balance, just put which one has the highest rate first and then go down line by line. And then the last one, this one people don't really talk about. So the first 2 people usually like in the internet world and in the personal finance world will tell you to know each one of those, your debt balance and your interest rate. But what people really don't talk about, which is what I really like to talk about, is your emotional discomfort and annoyance for that debt. Because some debts trigger more feelings than others. So for example, if you have a student loan debt and that debt is like the one that just like makes you upset, or maybe it's a car loan debt, like meaning like you're just upset at yourself that you have the debt. You're upset at yourself that you still haven't paid it off, or you come to realize that it was not worth whatever it was that you bought. Like it really annoys you and grinds you like, what the hell did I do? Put the highest annoyance debt first and list them that way. So again, you're taking all your debts. So say you have 5 debts through credit cards, student loans, car loans. You're going to take those 5 debts and rearrange them all in 3 ways. Highest to lowest interest rate, lowest to highest outstanding debt balance, and then highest to lowest emotional discomfort and annoyance. And so this is important because it takes us to our next step. So once you have that list, you're going to go to step 5. Determine your payoff strategy. Decide the order in which you want to pay off your debts. Now, I recommend paying off the smallest balance first, especially debts that you can pay off in 6 months or less. Because, all right, I know that some people will say, like, technically, if you have a highest interest rate debt, you should knock that out first because you're obviously paying more on that to keep that open. But I believe in quick wins. So if you have something that you can knock out in 6 months or less, and it's going to make you feel amazing and it's going to motivate you, then knock that out first. Getting rid of these relatively smaller balance debts will improve your financial confidence and then help build the momentum you need to keep you motivated. If you have debts around the same balance, pay off the ones with the highest interest rates first, because this will save you money on interest payments. And then to go to the last list that I asked you to do in step 4. So if one is causing you more angst and emotional burden than another, make that debt a priority, regardless of interest rate or loan balance, because knocking out these debts first will alleviate those negative feelings that you need to help, like, to get rid of, to improve your morale. How you feel about your finances and the progress you make towards your goals are very important. It's what keeps you motivated. And so I know logically, it would make sense to maybe do the lowest balance or highest interest rate first. But if there is something really bugging you, then maybe you attack that one first to get it out the way. And sometimes you might be able to find like a sweet spot between all the list, and then it's more clear on what you should do. And again, you'll be able to find that. I have a actually sweet spot list where you'll be able to list everything and find out which strategy you should use in the show notes. Step 6, create a budget. I'm never not going to say this, guys. You need to have a budget. So if you don't have one, now is the time to create one. And if you do have a budget, because I know I poll my audience and you guys all the time about like budgets. And a lot of you guys say you have budgets, but that you still can't get ahead of your finances. And so while budgeting is not always just going to be, you're going to get it right the first time, the point of a budget is to really help you navigate and manage your money and the inflow and outflow of money. So what you want to do is find ways to maximize the amount you can allocate to debt above the mandatory minimum payments. So you want to be able to squeeze out extra money out of your budget by spending less or finding ways to increase your income. Like that is the key to all of this. Because if you keep on the same path that you're on, whatever that is, and you're not finding ways to create that gap that I talk about is how can you either make more money and or spend less, you won't be able to knock the debts out and move on, to wealth building. Step 7. So now in step 6, you created a budget or you refined your budget and you are looking at ways in which you can all right, I am going to figure out how to make more with what I got. Now you need to accelerate your debt payoff. So apply any extra money you find in your budget to paying off outstanding debt. So hold off on spending on discretionary items while in debt payoff mode. If you feel the need to reward or treat yourself, do so by paying off debt, not by buying another item you don't need or won't remember years from now. So go back to step 2. You don't want to create that cycle again and again, or you're just buying things that you don't need. And accelerate debt payoff. So here's the thing. In order for you, if you're in debt and you're struggling to get out of it, you want to move on to, wealth building, you're going to have to be uncomfortable. And I know that sucks. We want to be able to treat ourselves. We probably feel like we work hard. Maybe, you work hard. You go to work. Maybe you have a long commute like me. And you want to be able to sometimes treat yourself. And sometimes you don't understand how everyone around you seems to be treating themselves really, really well. And you're just looking at well, wait a second, not counting anyone's pockets, but you don't understand maybe how someone else can seem to be living a carefree life, spending money, and you feel like you can't do the same for whatever reason. So it kind of, you want to be able to treat yourself. And I'm just challenging you that in this season of debt payoff, you got to be focused. It will be uncomfortable. You're going to have to give certain things up. You're going to have to maybe do things you don't want to do. But this is the beauty of change. This is the beauty of expanding beyond our current situation, because if we were to do the same thing, we would never improve. So you really, really have to push yourself on this level. So yes, it will be uncomfortable, but you will be okay. Trust me. And think about it this way. If you are able to stay in debt acceleration mode, and reasonably, right? So I'm not saying that you should never, ever go out to eat again if you're in debt. I'm not saying that. I'm saying budget for it and be smart about it and squeeze money to do other things, to be able to pay off your debt quicker. That is the goal. So again, I'm not saying that you cannot have fun or do something, but it's going to be uncomfortable. So step 8, this is one of the most important steps. It seems when I say it, it's going to seem very simple, but stay the course. The journey to debt freedom will not be easy, but you need to stay the course. So setbacks, emergencies, and unexpected expenses will occur. It may even feel like sometimes you're taking 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. So you might say to yourself, okay, I'm going to be focused. I'm going to pay off this debt. And for a month, you are focused and you're paying it off. And then some emergency happens that maybe you didn't budget for or you couldn't pay. And then it puts you a little bit back into more debt. I want you to know that that's actually normal. And that is just the seasons of the debt journey. This is what happens. And so what happens for a lot of people is they'll get these setbacks and then they'll stop. They will feel discouraged and feel like, well, what's the point? And I'm telling you that there is a light at the end of the tunnel if you just keep going. Because the important thing that you're doing through all these steps is that you're changing your behavior and you're changing your mindset. So even if your income is not catching up or increasing the way you want. Even if your expenses, like you feel like you can't get them down anymore, you've been trying, the point is you're working that muscle. You're working that income muscle. You're working that expense muscle where you're saving and you're being smart. So that way, when the opportunity comes for which you can start getting more ahead, so you won't have so many unexpected emergencies, or maybe you do get in a better position to make more money, you will be prepared for those blessings because you're ready. You've been practicing for it. So really, stay the course, stay determined, and keep moving forward. I promise you that you'll make progress. So the road will not be easy, but it will definitely be worth it. So those are my 8 steps to getting out of debt and staying out of debt. I really hope that you guys follow them, and you can ask me questions on them. So you know where to find me. I am on Journey to Launch on all social media. You can even join the private Facebook group. So in the Facebook group, we talk more about each episode. We dive deeper into topics, and we talk about topics that we're not even discussing yet on episodes. So it's a really great group. If you want to become a journeyer, just go to journeytolaunch.com/community and join us over there, because I think we're a great group, if I do say so myself. So this was a short episode. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to play a voicemail. So I don't know if you guys know this, but you guys can leave me actual voicemails that I can play on the podcast. So if you want to leave me a question, if you have a personal finance question that you would like me to answer live on the podcast, and so you'll hear your voice, you'll hear everything on the podcast, and I'll answer your question, I can do that. If you want to just give me feedback of what you learned from a previous episode, leave your voicemail. Or if you just want to, say hi, you can do that also by leaving a voicemail. Go to journeytolaunch.com/voicemail to leave me a voicemail. Right now, I am going to play a voicemail that I just got. It's my first one, so I wanted to play it instead of reading. I know I've been reading iTunes reviews lately, but I thought this was a little bit more fun because you get to hear someone else speaking, not me, about what they learned from the podcast. So I'm going to play it right now.
Hey, Jamila, this is Chris. I just wanted to call in and first say really enjoying the podcast. I've been enjoying the guests you've been having on, and just really excited to see what else you have coming out in the future. And I really enjoyed the last episode with Dorian on negotiating a raise. Where I work, we're on a set payment schedule, so I couldn't necessarily negotiate more money. But what I did like were her tips on updating your LinkedIn profile and some of the things you can do to make yourself more, recognizable and attract more attention. So I definitely will be implementing some of those things she suggested to my profile, and look forward to see how that improves the traffic, because I kind of ignore my LinkedIn profile, and I know I probably should give it a little more attention. So thanks again, and I'll definitely be listening.
Thanks, Chris, for leaving me my first voicemail. So if you guys have not heard the episode that Chris is talking about, how to negotiate a $25,000 raise, you can go back and listen to it. It's the episode right before this one. And Dorian St. Flora from Your Career Girl gave excellent tips. If you want to leave your own voicemail, go to journeytolaunch.com/voicemail. And as I always say at the end of every episode, thank you so much for tuning in, listening, and supporting me on this journey. I'll see you next week.